The Detroit Pistons take on the Washington Wizards tonight in their fourth game of the NBA season. We're going to preview what to see in tonight's game in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Kuka Hill. You can find me over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. And thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons, hit that subscribe button, or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on. And today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. So, guys, the Detroit Pistons are going to be taking on the Washington Wizards tonight in their fourth game of the NBA season. This past weekend was not too kind to the Detroit Pistons. They had a tough loss to the New York Knicks, a really embarrassing type of loss to the Indiana Pacers. So they look to bounce back tonight against the Washington Wizards. And just to do a quick preview of tonight's game and what to watch for in tonight's game, a little bit later in the podcast, we'll talk about some things that have to happen tonight or that you really want to see change tonight, need to start to see change tonight. We'll talk about that later. But let's give a quick preview of tonight. So I think, well, first off, the Wizards are a team that the Pistons are projected to be like around the same record-wise. Like that's one of the teams that a lot of you guys listening have thought that the Pistons could jump ahead of this year in the Eastern Conference. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I think the Pistons and Wizards are around the same little tier of teams in the Eastern Conference. So I think this would be a good measuring tape for where the Pistons are right now. I don't think the Knicks were one. I've said for a while, I think the Knicks are just way better than the Pistons. I don't know why people kept sleeping on the Knicks. Like I know they're the Knicks and people like to make fun of them, but they have a really, really good team. So I don't really know why everyone thought beforehand the Pistons were just going to be way better than the Knicks. I never understood that. The Pacers are also in the same tier as the Pistons, and I feel like that kind of gave you a good measuring tape as well because, I mean, the Pacers kind of handled them and Bennedict Mathurin went psycho. The thing with the Washington Wizards that I think the Pistons may run into some issues with is, again, and it's kind of the same issue with the Magic, and the Pistons are able to beat the Magic, but the Wizards have a lot of big wings, and I feel like big wings are going to be like a really big thing the Pistons struggle with for this entire season at least, unless they address it through trade. Sadiq and Bojan are just not good defenders. We've talked about that enough. And having them at your 3 and 4, if you're going against a team that has a 3 and 4 that's capable of scoring or capable of making bad defenders pay, those are the big kind of players that you want on your team. You really want to have big wings who are able to do that. They're more valuable, in my opinion, at this time or in this era of the NBA than small guards. If you can have some wings that can score, they really put pressure on you in ways that other people or other players can't. And the fact that the Pistons are going to be going against Kyle Kuzma, who's a damn good player now, Rui Hachimura, Denny Avija, I think I said his name correctly. If not, I'm sorry. And Kristaps Porzingis, who isn't really a center. He's going to be. I think he's more of a power forward, but obviously he'll be playing center. He's not so much of a wing, but also Will Barton. I think that's some nice firepower for the Wizards. So I think that the Pistons' wings are going to have a handful to deal with tonight. And Sadiq Bey and Bojan Bogdanovic on the defensive side, at least, they're going to have to keep up scoring-wise with what's going on over there on the Wizards side. I expect Kyle Kuzma to probably have a good game tonight against the Pistons. And then obviously they got Bradley Beal, who's one of the better players in the NBA, one of the best scorers in the NBA. And I'm interested to see when Cade and Jaden Ivey come out, I wonder if the Pistons put Killian on Bradley Beal or if this is a game that you see Killian play a little bit more. Last game, I don't understand why they didn't put Killian on Bennedict Mathurin, at least when he was in the game with him. If you're not going to put Killian on the best offensive perimeter player, you're basically you might as well not even have him on the floor because that's where his real value comes from. So if you're not going to have him on there, you might as well not even play him. I also don't know who are they going to put Jane Ivey or Kay Cunningham on Bradley Beal. I'm interested to see that. I'm probably going to go Kay Cunningham. He's a little bit bigger, and you hope with a year under his belt, he won't be susceptible to foul trouble as much as Jane Ivey will. Hopefully, Cade can be a little bit smarter with it. I think if you put Jane Ivey on a player like that, he may get into foul trouble quickly. So I think it's going to be a Cade versus Bradley Beal matchup. And again, kind of like I said with the Orlando Magic game, I think this is going to be a game. If the Pistons want to win this game, this is going to be one of those games that the backcourt is going to have to outplay the other backcourt or outplay the Wizards front court. I do think that Hachimura, Avila, Kristaps, Will Barton, Kyle Kuzma, I think those guys are going to outplay, or maybe I won't say outplay, but definitely give the Pistons front court some issues. So I think that's going to be a mismatch for the Pistons side, though I think the Pistons going against Bradley Beal, DeLon Wright in the backcourt, whatever, I think the Pistons can win that matchup. Monty Morris. I think Kate Cunningham and Jane Ivey can win that matchup much like they did in the Orlando game. And I think that can kind of get them a win as well. Also, the bench has to play much better. The bench was fine in the first game. Last two games, it's been a struggle with the bench. The bench has to play better in tonight's game if the Pistons want a chance to win this game. Backcourt, bench, key to success in this game against the Washington Wizards. I guess I'm thinking about from now on the podcast, like making my prediction for games every single day. And I think I'm going to start that today. I was hesitant about doing it, but I think I'm going to do it now. I'm going to predict that the Pistons win this game. I think Cade comes out and has a really nice game. I think Jane Ivey continues to play very well for a rookie. I think actually not even just for a rookie. He's doing a great job finishing around the basket, playing efficiently, not turning the ball over a ton. I think he's actually playing really damn well. So I think Jane Ivey continues to play really well. I don't think Washington's some great defensive team either. So I think the Pistons will continue to be able to play in transition and play really well offensively. So I think Cade and Jane Ivey have a nice game. I don't think Sadiq, hopefully he's not inconsistent. He had a nice game. Hopefully he doesn't come back down and have a bad game. If he can stay consistent, I don't think the Wizards have anybody that can really just run him off the three-point line consistently. I think he'll play a nice game. Boyan will be consistent. And then I think the bench bounces back tonight. I think a second game for Isaiah Livers. I think he plays well. I think Killian plays really well in tonight's game. And I think that Jalen Duren, with another game under his belt, going against the Washington Wizards with Isaiah Livers and Killian Hayes in the bench with him, operating with him, and Killian kind of creating for him. I think the bench will be better tonight. The bench should not be as bad it was the last two games. I feel like that was an anomaly. The bench should not have been that bad. I'll just leave it at that. I think they'll be better tonight. I think the Pistons backcourt will outplay Bradley Beal and his partner tonight and lead the Pistons to a win tonight. Hopefully I'm right. The Pistons need this win. This first 10 games is going to be an absolute struggle for them if they lose this game. So I think they win tonight, but we'll see what happens. When we come back, we'll talk about some things that have to absolutely change tonight. You have to see some kind of momentum. I know it's just 3 games, but these players and these units and these rotations, all this that we're about to talk about, despite it just being 3 games, you don't want to go on 4 games of it happening because now it starts to get in your head. It's really going to start stacking up, and eventually we're going to be at game 7 and game 8 saying, oh, it's just game 8. No, you're going to want to turn this around early. You don't want this hanging around with you. And these are the things that have to change tonight against the Washington Wizards. We'll talk about that when we come back. But first, I got to tell you guys about one of our sponsors, LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. You simply add your job and you put the purple hiring hashtag frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you are hiring. You and your small business are hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skill set and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire for the long run. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster and for free. Post your jobs for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Again, that is linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button at Locked On Pistons, or leave a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on. So it's only 3 games in the season. And I've told you guys many times, my rule of thumb, and I feel like this is pretty a consistent rule of thumb that you'll see throughout coaches and other people who analyze the game and all that, maybe a little different, but I think it's around the same ballpark. I don't like to do like legit evaluations until the 2025 game mark. I feel like what you should do for a player's season is really evaluate it 20 to 25 games as a stretch. Then the next 20, 25 games, stretch. 20-25 games stretch. Because there's a lot of ups and downs in the NBA season. The ones who can play extremely well throughout the whole season are some of the best, are like top 10, top 15 players. That's what makes them great. There's plenty of players who can have high ups every now and then. But the ones who are great are the ones that consistently be that great throughout the entire year. And that's how you become like top 10, top 15 in the league. The vast majority of players have ups, downs, stretches where they play really well, stretches where they don't play well. So I just feel like evaluating and giving longer game sample size and evaluating in like kind of fourths throughout the season, 20-25 games, 20-25 games, 20-25 games. That kind of way, I feel like that's probably the most fairest way to go about it. Because just go back to last year with Saddiq Bey. Saddiq Bey played really bad the first 26 games of the season, but then the rest of the year he played really well. But his season stats don't look as well because that first 26 games really weighed it down. But if you looked at it from 25 games, 25 games, 25 games, 25, that kind of thing, you'd see, oh, he actually played really well as the season started progressing. He just had a really bad start. Anyways, that was a little bit of a tangent I went on. My point is, I don't want to do hardcore evals of anybody. It's only been 3 games. That's crazy to do. But you definitely don't want things to linger around too long. You don't want to have struggles for too long. 2 games, 3 games, 4 games, then eventually it's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now it's a real long stretch. Now it's in your head, and now you can't turn it around. Now you're struggling, and you may not come back from it. So you definitely just want to turn it around as soon as possible. And these are some things that we're going to talk about in the podcast that I think we need to see turn around or start to turn around, start to see some progression in tonight's game against the Washington Wizards. The first thing is the play of the bench. The bench should not be this bad. Now, listen, I understand that in the second game, they were playing with Hamidou Diallo and Kevin Knox on the floor together, and the spacing with him, or those two, Corey Joseph, Killian Hayes, and Jalen Duren, just wasn't there at all. But even then, in the Knicks game, they didn't show a lot of effort defensively. They were getting beat in transition consistently, weren't getting back on defense consistently. It was putrid effort from them, and that's something that you don't see from Dwayne Casey teams very often. And you maybe could even say the same thing against the Pacers. And that was kind of this like team-wide thing. We talked about that on the podcast, I believe 2 episodes ago, how it just looked like the Pistons had their heart snatched. Like, you don't see that very often with Dwayne Casey teams. And you can make the argument that you've seen it twice now through 3 games. So the bench, while the spacing definitely is a concern, it shouldn't be as bad as we've seen it so far through those 2 games, especially against the Knicks. So I think tonight against the Wizards, in order for the Pistons to win, and just for the bench to start feeling better about themselves, and for them to start, they've only had 1 player play 20-plus minutes in a game this season. That's Jalen Duren in 1 game. Everyone else has remained under 20 minutes. That's crazy for a bench. The stars are playing heavy minutes. The bench isn't even barely playing because they haven't earned it enough. So tonight they need to turn it around. Killian Hayes, Corey Joseph, if Diallo's getting minutes, Livers, Duren, whether it's Hamidou Diallo or Kevin Knox gets a chance. I think Kevin Knox might get a chance tonight because Diallo was just bad last game. I think Diallo and Knox will be flip-flopping until Bagley gets back from injury, until one of them plays well and keeps the spot. That's what my prediction is. But nonetheless, tonight against the Wizards, they have to play better. You don't want to keep this thing going of the bench struggling, the starters having to play 35 minutes. Like, you don't want that to continue to happen. So definitely, I think the bench has to play better. Next thing is Killian Hayes' performance. Listen, I'm a big believer in Killian. You guys know that. But eventually, if he gives you enough evidence, you have to even the biggest believer has to pull the plug on him. We're nowhere near that yet. It's only 3 games. I just want to make that clear. We're nowhere near there yet. But if he doesn't turn it around after 4 games, 5 games, has to get going, it's going to be hard for him mentally. And it's going to be hard for him to get into a groove on the court the longer his spell continues. You want to flip this around. You don't want to be in a position where you're looking at like, oh my God, man, this season's going awful, man. I have to do something. And then you start feeling pressure. You start feeling anxiety. Like, you don't want this to linger on too long. 3 games in, he's not shooting well. He's not playing well, at least scoring-wise. You could argue that he's doing fine defensively still. He's still passing the ball. He's only turned the ball over once, but we don't care about that. He has to score the ball. He has to shoot well. So tonight against the Wizards, he needs to turn this around. You don't want this to keep going on. It's going to be harder and harder and harder to snap out of it mentally and physically the longer this spell continues. And if he is going to turn it around, and if he is going to play well this year, like I believe he can, and like I believe he's going to break out this year, it has to start now. It has to start coming soon. This game or next game, it has to happen. Because the longer it takes, the longer this lingers, the harder it's going to be to snap out of it. So Killian Hayes has to play better tonight. Has to. This has to be the beginning. He has to start playing better, starting tonight. Next thing, Isaiah Stewart. So there was someone in the Pistons community. His name is, I don't know if all of you guys know him, but his name is Jack Kelly. He's a writer at Detroit Bad Boys. He put out a tweet today, and it was after 3 games, stock risers and stock droppers. And he had Isaiah Stewart as a stock riser. And that's what really sparked me to want to come on here, because that really sparked it in my head. Like, okay, I want to kind of talk about Stewart real quick, just through 3 games. I don't think his stock is rising through 3 games, but that's not where I'm going with this. I think Stu has to, not even just threes, he has to find something offensively tonight. And it's not just tonight. I mean, it may take longer. It's only 3 games in the season. I don't want to make it sound like I'm panicking over 3 games, but through 3 games, he's still struggling to find something offensively for him to really like fit in with. He's shooting 21% from deep. Now, that's just going to be something we have to deal with throughout the year. That's part of his progression. That's part of his development. He's not going to shoot well all the time. And it's only 3 games. I just want to make that clear to everybody. It's only been 3 games, but that's all we have to talk about. I can't talk about anything else. I'm sorry. That's just what we have right now at this point in time. But through 3 games, you can see that he's still having the same kind of struggle. So he's not shooting well from beyond the arc. But even what's more concerning to me is the fact he's shooting 32% from the field. He's shooting 45% on all 2-pointers. So, again, it is only 3 games. I'm going to keep saying that because I don't want people to try to make it seem like I'm freaking out over just 3 games. But he has to improve not just from 3. That's not just one of the things he needs to improve on. He has to improve from 2-point range. He has to become better in the dunker spot. He has to become better rolling to the rim. And, heck, he has to set better screens. We had Bryce on the podcast from the Pistons Pulse a few days ago, and he talked about how Stu doesn't even set that great of screens recently. He didn't do it. I mean, I know he started doing high-rise screens a little bit last year, and that started to work a ton. But even then, he has to set some hard-body screens to really put an impact on the offense. If he's not going to be able to score at the rim, if he's not going to, right now at the very least, if he's not going to be able to shoot from outside right now consistently, set hard screens, because that can create space for your team too. That can be really viable for your team too. So while you're struggling with those things, while you're trying to develop those things, while you're trying to improve those things, set some hard body screens, set some really hard screens. And that would make life easier for everyone that comes off a DHL with Stu, who comes off a pick and roll with Stu. If he actually stayed and set a hard screen, that would help. So I guess in the long run, I've said a lot with Stu, but in the long run, what I'm saying is I'd like to see him set some harder screens. That's basically what I wanted to get to. My overall point was he's struggling from deep. That's going to happen. He's struggling trying to develop around the rim. That's going to happen. But there's no reason why he can't set hard screens. So while you're doing that, let's see you set some hard screens and help the team out, because I feel like that's the one place right now that he can consistently control, making an impact offensively. The other stuff is going to come and go. We'll have to see if it develops. But setting screens, he can do that. He's a strong guy. He's one of the strongest dudes in the league, dude. Stu is a freak dude when it comes to strength. The dude's strong as hell. Him and Jalen Duren look like behemoths. Like, there's no reason why you can't set a hard screen, dude. So let's see him do that tonight. I think that will actually do it. I know that doesn't show up in the box score, and that may sound stupid to some of you guys. Like, screens, we're talking about screens for real. But they're important. They really are important. And if he does that, a good screener and a bad screener make a big impact on your offense. I feel like if Stu just committed to being a good screener, it could help him and the offense sustain right now while he develops those other parts of his game. So that's what I want to see tonight. When we come back, we'll talk about some other things from tonight's game that we want to see. But first, you guys got to hear from some of our lovely sponsors. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons, hit that subscribe button, or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. All right, so I'm actually going to detour this. I know I told you guys that we were going to talk more about tonight's game, but I feel like we really talked about everything that really is of importance, for real. I'm going to take this in a different route. I don't know if I'm going to make this like a new segment that we start doing a little bit more often on the podcast. But what I'm about to do is in an effort for you guys, to encourage you guys, the listeners, to watch some other teams and to watch some fun NBA teams. Let me give you guys a little bit of advice, because I dealt with this hard the last few years. Watching a rebuilding team and watching a team that's, just to be frank, not very good consistently. And listen, especially when you are invested in this team. Like, I know it's not actually us out there. I know it's not actually, we're not the ones actually out there playing basketball. It shouldn't actually impact our lives. But I think all of us would be kind of trolling if we sat here and said like a Pistons loss or a bad performance by one of our favorite players on the team don't impact us afterwards. We're not sitting there after like, oh my God, this is another bad night, another bad sports night, man. Why can't I just have a fun team? Like, I know it happens to all of us, because I know it happened to me the last 2 years. It starts to wear and tear on you if that's all you're having in your sports life. If you're a big sports fan, that's all you're having, it wears on you. So what I'm going to start doing, and what I'm going to encourage you guys to do, is to watch other teams, watch some other fun teams and this is how we're going to tie it into the Pistons, with the idea in your head of what kind of player would this player make sense for the Pistons? With this archetype, what kind of archetype do I see from other teams? What I'd like to see on the Pistons? What player that maybe I wouldn't want to see the Pistons trade for that exact player, but his type of player, what I want to see in the Pistons? This would really help the Pistons. Oh, I'd love to watch this kind of guy on the Pistons. I think this would really help them. I think you guys should start doing that. I'm going to start doing that as one of the regular segments on the podcast to try and make the season go a little bit more smoother and for us to have more fun. There's plenty of fun teams and fun players in the NBA that you should be watching outside the Pistons. So to start it off, the first time ever we're doing this. So before I started recording, I was watching the Portland and Denver Nuggets game. And there's a player on the Denver Nuggets who I think if the Pistons had him, now not actually trade for him, because that's not going to happen. I don't mean literally have to go get him. But if they had him on this roster, I think his archetype would be a perfect fit for this team. And it's exactly why I think this team needs in the future. And I think in the future, it's the number one fit that I think the Pistons need. Before it was the center position, but I think Jalen Duren probably has that locked up right now. And the guy I'm talking about is Aaron Gordon. I think if the Pistons had an Aaron Gordon archetype, that is exactly what they're missing. A big, strong dude, hyper athletic, one of the best athletes in the NBA, one of the best dunkers we've ever seen, but not just dunkers, one of the best athletes we've ever seen. That dude's a freak. A big, strong dude who can switch 1 through 5, a really nice defender, really, really nice defender, with playmaking chops, with ball handling chops, and can operate in small areas. Because in the future, Cade and Ivy, I feel like we've already seen it. And it's kind of a question we've already brought up about how are they going to be able to share the ball between each other, let alone the whole team. So I think what we're going to see for the Pistons in the future is those two guys are going to monopolize the basketball, and everyone around those two guys have to fit with them. I don't think that Cade needs to fit with someone else. Jane Ivy needs to fit with someone else. I think for the future, the entire team needs to fit with those two guys. And I think a guy like Aaron Gordon, who can operate in small spaces, in the dunker spot, on cuts, in transit. Imagine Aaron Gordon type of player with the Pistons, Cade Cunningham, and Jane Ivy in transition, with Jalen Duren eventually. Imagine that team in fast break situation. That would put fear into every team they go against. That would be tremendous to watch. It would be crazy. But a guy who can also switch 1 through 5 for you on the defensive end, who's a really nice defender on that end, and can also play make from the high post, can make some smart plays in the short roll, hit Jalen Duren, who would be like in the dunker spot if he's on the short roll. He can lob it to Jalen Duren. He can make a kick out. Really smart, nice passer. The one thing with Aaron Gordon is he's not a great shooter. For his career, he's a 32% shooter. And that, yes, you'd like to see someone shoot a little bit better, but then if you're asking for a player who can do all that, and then a player who also shoots like 36% from deep, you're looking at like an all-NBA type of player. Like if Aaron Gordon was doing that, he'd be like an all-NBA type of player, scoring like 19, 20 points a game if he was doing that kind of stuff with all the other stuff he had. There's going to be a downside to it. And I think the Pistons can get by with a dude. And again, I'm not saying literally Aaron Gordon, everybody. If Aaron Gordon was on the Pistons, I'd love it. He's one of my favorite players. I love watching Aaron Gordon. So I'd love it if he was on this team like 4 or 5 years ago when he was younger, or if he just took the younger version of Aaron Gordon and put him into this core. I'd like that. But I'm not talking about literally Aaron Gordon, but Aaron Gordon kind of archetype. I think you can live with him not being a great shooter if he's bringing all that other stuff to you. I think that other stuff is vastly needed on this team. This team needs a wing who can play really good defense and make impact plays on the defensive end, who's also hyper athletic, can run in transition with these guys, make the right play, pass the ball really well, has ball handling chops, who can take some of the pressure. Maybe when Cade goes out or Jaden goes out, he can operate in the second unit and ball handle and take some of the pressure off whoever else is out there. I think that archetype is really needed for the Pistons. I think it's number one on my list, to be honest now. Right after that, I have just overall shooting. But I think, again, like I said, you need guys who can play off of Ivy and Cade, not guys. You don't need to be asking, okay, does Cade fit with this guy? What about Ivy? Does he fit with this guy? No, it should be Cade and Ivy as a tandem and just really trying to see, can he play off of them? And I think Aaron Gordon would really play well off of those two guys, or a guy like Aaron Gordon. I keep saying Aaron Gordon, but I hope you guys understand it. I'm going to say it for probably the 5th time. Not literally Aaron Gordon, but that kind of archetype, I think that would be really nice. He would bring a lot of good stuff to the Pistons that they're missing. That's just one of the players I think. So in the comment section down below, or if you want to tweet at me, at Kuka Hill, what's the player? Maybe you've already been watching some NBA games. Maybe you already, for the past few years, you've been way ahead of me. You guys have already been watching a ton of other basketball throughout the NBA. Fun teams. Maybe not just contenders, but fun teams to try to take some of the stress off of watching a rebuilding team. Maybe you guys already have a player in mind that you guys think of, man, if we had that player, if we had a player like that on the team. And don't just say a superstar. Don't cheat. Don't say like, oh, if we had LeBron. No shit. Come on. Like, don't say LeBron or like some superstar. Give me like kind of like a starter average player, above average starter, a guy who can maybe be an all-star in a really good season, that kind of thing. Don't give me like some superstar. Obviously, the Pistons could use a superstar. Let me know if you guys know a player. You guys have seen a player maybe this season already through 2 or 3 games. Let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter who that player is, what kind of archetype of a player you've seen so far. That is, I'm really interested in seeing. Mine's going to be Aaron Gordon for this episode. We might do that again one episode next week. I don't want to do it every single episode. It'll get boring. So we'll do that again next week. Stay tuned for that. But that's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. Hit that subscribe button over at the YouTube channel. 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. I really appreciate all of you guys for supporting the podcast. Enjoy the game tonight. Hopefully the Pistons get that dub. I think they will. I'm predicting it. I don't advise putting money on the Pistons. I've done it twice now this year, and both times I've not on them to win, but involving them. I've done it twice now, and both times I've basically donated to charity. So I don't advise doing that, but enjoy the game nonetheless. I'll see you guys in the next podcast. Hopefully they win. Stay safe, everybody, and peace out.